Good morning. This is Daniel here with Cop Watch TV. I just want to welcome everyone in. Thank you for joining. Today we're going to go over some of the most important issues in policing and go over some of the stories that have happened recently. And for a few of them that have relevant body cam links, we're going to link those in the chat as well. So in the comments, so you can see the cases that we're talking about. There was so much that happened in the last week or so that it was almost difficult to try to figure out which cases to talk about. So that's one of the things. If you have a case that you think is interesting or has some type of an interesting legal issue or just completely wild body cam, or you have a question, put it in the chat, because those are the kinds of things that we look at to make sure that we get out the kind of content that the viewers, that you guys think are interesting. So, we do this about once a week, usually on Fridays at 11 o'clock Mountain. So, just to make sure that you know when we're going live and just to see all the other great videos that Cop Watch TV puts out, make sure that you like and subscribe to this channel. If you want to find my channel, it's called Police Law News. I do daily content over there. But yeah, make sure that you follow those channels, and especially just so you know when the lives are coming in, because we definitely like to interact. If you have any questions or comments in the chat while we're going through some of these cases, definitely put them in there. I love to communicate. Sergeant George says, first time watching the live stream, by the way. Well, thank you, Sergeant George. If you have any questions while we're going through, definitely put it in. Sometimes we get a lot of questions, which is a great thing, but if you do a super chat, we will for sure answer your question. But one of the great things about covering these kinds of issues, and one of the reasons why I am just so interested in this and always have been, is because there just isn't a lack of cases. Every week there's new cases, there's new body cam, and it's just every week there's just so much to talk about, and it's just such an interesting topic. So I'm going to get into the cases right away. So the first case that I want to talk about is it's a French fry killer. And it's a weird week when you say that we're going to talk about a French fry killer case, and you have two cases to choose from. So there were actually two cases in the last 10 days or so that involve McDonald's, cold French fries, and a killer. But the first one that I'm going to talk about, so this happened on August 5th of this year in Kennesaw, Georgia. And we do have a link to the body cam video that we'll put in there. So, after the live chat, definitely go and watch the body cam video, because it is really good body cam video. So what happened on this date is an individual named Antoine Sims. He went into a McDonald's in Kennesaw, Georgia, and the French fries just weren't to his liking. But the thing is, they weren't cold; they were lukewarm. So he went back into the store, to the McDonald's, and he got into a thing with the manager. Now, most people, when your food is not up to the satisfaction level that the customer thinks, you go in, you ask for a refund or for them to make you more food. And there's pretty much standard practice and policy from fast food chains. They deal with this all the time. It isn't that big of a deal. So I kind of always think that when things like this go bad, I almost always blame the customer, because McDonald's employees, they deal with this all the time. Anyways, so the confrontation about the lukewarm French fries got so heated that both individuals called police. So Anton Sims called police, and so did the manager of the McDonald's store. Now, okay, so this happens sometimes, but the reason why it's so strange that Anton Sims called police is because he had a warrant for a homicide. And it's not like, he was this mastermind criminal where he did something years ago and he had no idea that the police were on him, so he didn't think he would come up on anyone's radar. No. Earlier in the year, earlier in 2022, the facts of this case, all I really know is that there was a dead body that was burned, that was found in a car that was burned, and there were 3 people who were charged with that homicide. I believe that Anton was the individual he was at least accused, and he's innocent until proven guilty, but he's accused of being the getaway driver for that particular homicide. So he was released on bond, he had an ankle monitor, and he was supposed to have a court date for this homicide charge on July 26th. He missed that court date, and then this happened August 5th. So, 10 days or so later. So it's not like he was confused. So he has a warrant for a homicide. He initiates the police contact, which just doesn't make any sense. So police get there, they talk to both individuals, And, at this point, they hadn't run Anton's name, so they don't know him from anywhere else. All they were going to do at the request of the management from McDonald's is issue Anton a criminal trespass notice. Basically, just putting it on paper saying, hey, you are criminally trespassed from this private business. You're no longer welcome here. So this is your notice. So, in a perfect and ideal world, you give that to the individual. And then, if the person comes back, it's at that point that they would be arrested or they could be cited or, somehow the police could take some enforcement action. So it was during that process that the police realized that, hey, this guy has a felony warrant. So while they're giving him the citation, they kind of want to get him close, and they're just about to go in to make an arrest, and of course he starts to run. He says he's afraid. He starts to run. There's a foot chase. Now, one of the things in the body cam video happens in the foot chase is almost immediately the officer falls down. And, I just want to say that when you're a police officer and you get into a foot chase, police officers falling during foot chases, it's especially if you're not like a first or second year officer, it happens all the time. The reason is because the gear that police officers carry usually is somewhere between 20 to 30 pounds, and you wear these boots, these heavy boots. They're great for standing, but they're terrible for running. So it's the heavy boots and the 30 pounds of extra weight. You start going a little bit, and the forward momentum just makes you splat. So the officer, he immediately falls down. Antoine ends up running. Long story short, they do end up finding him in an adjacent apartment complex. Not that far after that. They get into a foot chase with him. A taser is used, and he gets into custody. So they end up, arresting him. And, it's just one of those things where he liked lukewarm, his love for hot French fries was so great that he's willing to spend like decades in prison just to make sure that everybody knows about it, which is just absolutely crazy. And one of the other things that I want to point out in the body cam video, let's see, so we have a serial killer. That's a great name. I know I said that last time. Well, hopefully the fries in prison will be to his liking because that's where he is headed. Absolutely, yeah. Hopefully he has fries in prison. But one thing that I want to say about his stay in prison, should he be found guilty, is, so there's this bit that Dave Chappelle has done where he talks about, and it reminds me of this, so this is connected, I promise. He does this bit where he says, if I'm ever in a situation, an emergency, where I have to call 911, I hope they never play it on the news because I'm going to sound so scared I'm never going to be able to look my buddies in the face again. It's a funny thing that Dave Chappelle does. So that's kind of what happened here. So after he was tased, after the taser, and he's laying on the ground, Antoine lets out this like high-pitched scream. It almost sounds like, if you listen to it the first time, it almost sounds like an ambulance siren. I mean, I think someone is going to use this as their ringtone on their phone. It's absolutely crazy. It's the strangest sound, but how could he ever face his buddies in prison after that if they see this body cam video? So I wanted to talk about that case because it kind of has a good ending when it comes to French fry killers, because, he was in custody. It's a little bit funny that he initiated the police contact himself. And, I just can't help but think that if only the French fries were as hot as the dead, burned body in the car, that this whole thing probably could have been avoided. So the second case about a French fry killer, which I'm not going to get into the details, but it was actually kind of a sad case. It's a really sad case because of an incident at a McDonald's in Brooklyn where an individual did complain about French fries. The staff apparently or allegedly laughed at the individual, and the person who had the cold French fries ended up stabbing the worker at McDonald's, and they ended up passing away. They have the individual in custody, but both of those two things happened in the last couple weeks. So like I said, the first one was a little funnier, so we did share the body cam footage for that. So does anybody have any comments about that? Let's see. Yeah, hopefully the fries in prison. That's a great comment. I like that. Milena, you saw the video. He was so stupid. Yeah, I don't know what he was thinking. Sergeant George, those poor McDonald's workers. Yeah, I mean, the real MVP is that McDonald's manager who, didn't give in to this guy. For whatever reason, he was like, we're not going through the normal process. So whatever he did to be a jerk, someone commented freedom fries. That is so funny. Thank you. And they had a 5 freedom fries. That is so funny. But yeah, so that's an interesting case. Sometimes I know that it's kind of standard to say that criminals are stupid, but yeah, sometimes they really are. So this just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So the next case that I want to talk about, it's a case that happened in Pasadena, California on 8/14. So really just a couple days ago. And you know what? I initially wasn't going to talk about this case because this is a case that I saw the case, I read the story, and then I watched the body cam footage, and I thought, okay, this really isn't a story. You know, this is a good story about cops. You know, on my TikTok channel, I have a playlist called Good News About Cops. It's almost one of those cases that I thought about putting into that file because to me this is a good story about police officers doing something reasonable and there's like a good outcome. And I'll get into the details in a second, but the outcry from this happened at a school. So the outcry from the public, the teachers, students, and people in the city were just so overwhelming negative against the police officers that I have to talk about it because we are going to post the body cam footage for this one. But I'm curious to see, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm missing something, but I think the police did a very good and reasonable job here. Let me tell you what happened. So again, this was in Pasadena, California on 8/14/22. So it was a Sunday and it was day shift. So it was the middle of the day on a Sunday, or in the morning on a Sunday, and there was a call for service to police. So essentially, a neighbor calls in and says that he sees something at the school. So it's a Sunday, so there's no class in session. The neighbor calls in and he gives police this information. He says an individual just jumped the fence to the back of the school. It's a male or a female individual. He couldn't tell, in their 20s or 30s. They have a backpack. It looks strange. He or she jumped the fence and they're on the school property. So that's all the police officers have going into it. So, you know, as a police officer, you're thinking a couple things. Okay, well, you know, maybe this could be someone who's supposed to be here, maybe not. But if it's someone who's supposed to be there, there should be signs of that. You know, the gate will be open because the gate's locked with a padlock. The gate will be open. There'll be a vehicle there. We can run the vehicle. You know, there's a lot of things police can do to, you know, try to determine what happened. So, you know, police officers get there and they see a couple things. They see that the gate is locked. So there's a gate, and they actually, in order to get in, they have to use bolt cutters. So the gate is locked with a chain link around it, and they do see an individual inside the school property. So he's not just walking around and he matches the description. It's a male in his 20s or 30s, and he has a backpack. He's walking around, and he's not just walking around like the perimeter of the school. The police officers can see two different doors to the school are wide open. And, you know, you might be thinking, well, if it was someone who was supposed to be there, wouldn't they just unlock the door and walk in? Like, why are these doors wide open? One of the doors looks like it's some kind of a storage closet, so it's weird. So in the moment, the police officers, you know, reasonably think that they have, you know, maybe a burglary or a breaking and entering. Either way, it's some type of felony that someone's committing at a school. So there's only 2 or 3 police officers there, so they use the bolt cutters to enter the school and to enter the gate. They walk in, and from a reasonable distance behind cover, they give the individual, as he's walking out of the school, they give him commands. They don't swear at him. They're not derogatory, but they basically give the guy commands to walk towards him, turn around, get down on his knees. The individual, he cooperates, he complies. They place him in handcuffs. Once he's in handcuffs, he tells them that he's a janitor there at the school. Now, the only way that they might know that, he has kind of on like a blue collared shirt, and it says like the Pasadena Unified School District, but I think it's the initial, so it says PUSD on it, and he says that he's a janitor there. Well, you know, I mean, it's you know, the police officers want to make sure. Anybody could say that they're a janitor at the school. The gate was locked. I mean, a caller called in and said this guy jumped it. Why would a janitor jump the fence? So, you know, almost immediately the guy says, I didn't jump the fence. I have keys. Here are the keys. Here's my phone. Please call my boss. So the police officers do really a quick investigation. One of them walks around the school just to make sure that there's no one else inside the school, and there wasn't. In the meantime, another officer finally calls his boss on the phone, and the boss of the janitor at the school, he confirms, yeah, he's there, he's supposed to be there. So, you know, but he was in handcuffs for probably about 6 minutes. During the 6 minutes, the police were nice, they were polite, they didn't swear at him, they didn't throw him to the ground, they handcuffed him and they had him sit on the curb. So, you know, when it comes to the treatment of the individual who, at the time that they think is a felony suspect, they were respectful and reasonable with the subject. And I'm not saying that the police should be praised for doing this. I'm just pointing out this is exactly how police should treat people. No matter what crime an individual is suspected of committing, if you have someone who is cooperative and polite, then that's how police officers officers should act. So I'm not saying we should praise the police officers for this. We should just note that, yeah, they acted as police officers should when someone is cooperating. So that's a good thing. And they end up releasing the guy. After he was released, they all kind of laugh about it, the individual, the janitor, and the police officers are kind of laughing about it. The police officers apologize. They say, hey, we're sorry this happened. We'll put a note in the system to make sure this doesn't happen again. And, it seemed like in the conversation that the janitor, that he understood why this happened. So that should be the end of it, right? But no, there was unbelievable outcry from teachers, from students, and the mayor had to get involved. So luckily, the police department is backing the police officers saying, hey, they did everything correct, but the outcry is terrible. The police chief had to make a statement. The principal at the school had to make a statement. The mayor of the city had to make a statement. They're doing a more deeper investigation into it. And I just want to say that to me, that seems unreasonable. To me, that seems like this is exactly how our police are supposed to respond. So it was a suspected felony crime in progress. Now, I want to just talk a little bit about eyewitness testimony. This is one of the reasons why eyewitness testimony is just garbage. It's awful. If it's not on video, you almost shouldn't believe it, because if you listen to the 911 call, which is also on the link, you can tell that the person who's calling in, he's not trying to get someone in trouble for no reason. He's not lying. He's not trying to be rude. He calls, even during his call, he says, I'm not sure if this is anything, but it looks suspicious, so I just want to report it. They asked the guy if he wants contact with the officers. He's like, no, I don't need contact with police. I just want to make sure everything's okay. So if you listen to the 911 call, it really doesn't sound like there's any bad faith on behalf of the individual who called, but he's being accused of being racist. Some people are saying that he should be put in jail. And the thing is that it's because he said that he saw someone jump the fence. Now, I don't think he was lying, but eyewitness testimony is so bad. What likely happened is he saw someone who was walking towards the fence. He saw that the fence is locked. He looks down for a second to grab his phone to call police or tell his wife or husband or kids that, hey, something's going on here. And he turns around, and 2.5 seconds later, he looks and the guy's over the fence, and he just assumes what happened. Like he didn't see it, but the brain is such a weird thing. His mind filled in gaps, and he couldn't distinguish what was real and what was not, especially because, this was a stressful situation for him. So, that's why eyewitness testimony is just garbage. I listened to the 911 call. This guy wasn't lying. He got it wrong. But the police officers, when they get on scene, they're not psychics. They don't have a crystal ball. So police officers know that this information is coming from a citizen who might not seen everything perfectly, and then they try to independently verify what the individual said. So if you look at it this way, it's like police officers, all the things the guy said, they get there. Okay, the gate's locked. Well, the guy said that. There's someone in there. They see the door open. The person matches the description. It's a Sunday. Typically people aren't at schools on Sunday. So I think it was reasonable for the police officers to believe a crime had been committed. And I just want to talk about that. This is a little bit off topic, but it's related. This is why, and please put in the chat if you disagree, because I know that there's people who disagree, and I'm cool if you disagree, because I'd rather have a conversation about it. This is why qualified immunity is so important for police officers. So qualified immunity protects police officers from personal lawsuits, from civil personal lawsuits. So qualified immunity does not protect police officers like Kim Potter, does not protect police officers like Derek Chauvin. It protects police officers like this, who in the moment make an honest, reasonable mistake. And it was a mistake because, essentially they handcuffed someone and temporarily took away someone's freedom for about 6 minutes when the person was totally innocent. So, without qualified immunity, this is one of those cases where police officers might be sued personally for their response. So like I said, qualified immunity, it does not stop police departments from investigating, from terminating. It doesn't stop the state from revoking a police license. Qualified immunity doesn't stop prosecutors from state charges or federal charges. It only protects police officers from personal civil lawsuits if they don't violate any established rights. So this is why I always say that qualified immunity is a good thing. It's for cases like this. Again, cases like Derek Chauvin and like George Floyd, there was qualified immunity in Minnesota. It didn't matter because he violated clearly established rights. So I just kind of want to put that out there, that this is a great example of why reasonable police officers want qualified immunity. It's for situations like this, not for actual crimes that are committed. Let's see. And here I was about to say, Sergeant George, here I was about to say how this has qualified immunity written all over it. Yeah, see, look at this. I think this is your first time in this thing, Sergeant George, and you're on the same page. Yeah, this is exactly why qualified immunity. Now, when people are against qualified immunity, and like, put in the chat if you think I'm wrong. When people are against qualified immunity, I found a couple things. They don't understand what it is, and then once I explain it, they go, oh, okay. Or, they don't want bad cops protected. Well, listen, I don't want bad cops protected either. Good cops don't want bad cops protected either. There was qualified immunity in Minnesota, and Derek Chauvin he was fired, and he's doing 22 years in prison. So qualified immunity does not protect a police officer if they violate clearly established rights. So just wanted to put that out there. So, that's kind of what I'm going to talk about. And, I think it's not a perfect, let's see. It's almost like the Harvard students were celebrated. This is almost like the Harvard when the students were celebrating the closure of the police substation. I'm not sure what case that is, but I'm sure you'll put it in there. And especially in a heightened sensitivity area when it comes to police officers in response to schools. No, of course, I'm not saying that this is Uvalde or this anything, but you have to realize that especially after the police response from Uvalde was so awful, was so horrible, was so terrible on many levels, which I've gone over a bunch of times, so I'm not going to do it again now, but let's just all agree the police response to Uvalde was terrible. So anytime police officers, whether students or they're not, are dispatched to a school, the fact that they are going to make sure that they cross all of their T's and dot all of their I's and make sure that they aren't leaving anything on the table and that they are going to make sure that they do a good job. That's a reasonable thing for a responding police officer to want. So another thing when it comes to, and since we talked about Uvalde, so someone tagged me in a TikTok, and I know it's silly, and this guy has 400,000 viewers. So he tagged me in a TikTok, and I did a response to it, and he said a couple things, and there were about 1 million views on this post he did, and thousands of comments of people agreeing with him. So I just want to say that maybe I'm on the wrong track. Let me know if you think I'm wrong or not. So the point of his TikTok, and I think we did a link in there. The point of it was he said that the Uvalde police were involved in a cover-up. And then he went in to talk about how bad the response was. So when it comes to the bad response, we're all on the same page. We all agree. But do we really think the Uvalde police are involved in a cover-up? I don't think so. Here's why. So all of the body cam video that has been released, over 3 hours of body cam, has been released by the mayor of Uvalde, Dan McLaughlin. So he released all the body cam. So just up first, if you are releasing body cam footage, then you're probably not engaged in a cover-up. And listen, common sense would say that the response from police in Uvalde was so horrible, was so awful, they should be engaging in a cover-up because it was so terrible, but they're not. The police in Uvalde are trying to justify what happened and explain what they did, and then they released all the body cam footage. The mayor of Uvalde released the body cam footage even though the Texas Department of Public Safety asked them not to. The head of the Texas Department of Public Safety, he even went to the Attorney General to try to get the city to not release the body cam footage, and they released it anyways because they wanted the raw footage out there because somehow they think it's going to exonerate what the police officers did. Which, again, that makes no sense, but I really don't think that Uvalde police are involved in a cover-up. So it's possible that both things can be true. It's a terrible response, but at least the police in Uvalde aren't trying to cover up what they did. They're putting all the body camera footage out there. Let's see. Milena, I back the blue, but not the bad apples wearing a badge, taking advantage of the job. Yeah, I think everybody would agree with you. And the people who are going to agree with you mostly are police officers are going to say that, yeah, we police officers want qualified immunity. They want protection if they make a reasonable mistake, and it's the people who are committing crimes on duty who screw it up for everybody else. Nobody wants them protected. Let's see, Anna 5, from what you say, they had reasonable suspicion, politely detained him for less than 10 minutes. I'm no fan of most police, but clearly they did nothing wrong or rights of violating. I appreciate that. And that's one of the reasons why not only Cop Watch TV makes the content they do to put out the raw footage, but also, one of the reasons why we do this show on Fridays is because I think it's more interesting to have conversations with people who might not agree. So Anetta Phi, I really appreciate your comment, and you're saying that you're not a fan of most police, but the fact that you're able to, even though you don't like most police, which is fine, the fact that you're able to look at an individual situation and not let that cloud your judgment, that means that you are an honest person looking at these cases. That is rare, and that is something that all of us appreciate. Let's see. Even the governor, Greg Abbott, is covering up for the police in Uvalde. Yeah, so that's such a great point. So I think if there is anybody trying to do a cover-up in Uvalde, I think it's the head of the Department of Public Safety in Texas. It's the governor. It's people who are up there. You have to look at it this way, and I just break it down simply. The people who are trying to release the body cam to the public, no cover-up. The people who are saying, well, hang on, that's how you know that people, the less transparent, the more likelihood of a cover-up. Not that Uvalde police did everything right. They did everything wrong, and those are the ones who should be trying to cover it up, but for whatever reason, they're not. They're trying to justify it. So I just wanted to make that point that, I don't think Uvalde police are involved in a cover-up. I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense. So any other comments about that? Definitely put it in there. One more comment. Makes you wish, Sergeant George, makes you wish that certain police officers should get qualified immunity. Yeah, no, I do. I think qualified immunity is a good thing. Like I said, the cases they cite, the Walter Scott case in South Carolina, where Officer Slager, Derek Chauvin, all of these cases, they're all like qualified immunity doesn't protect them anyway. So if you have an argument against qualified immunity, I'm good with it. I want to hear the argument, but don't list the police officers who are committing crimes and in prison, because literally qualified immunity just doesn't apply to them. If it's a successful cover-up, then we would never know. Yeah, you're right. We would never know if it's a successful cover-up, but the way that we can try to get around that ourselves is to get as much body cam footage as possible. So if we have all of the body cam footage and it's not edited and it's raw body cam footage, there isn't a whole lot they can cover up. I mean, they can spin narratives, of course, but people who are informed and who actually watch the footage, they would know what's going on, and I think transparency is the way that we should deal with all of these issues. So the next case I want to talk about is everybody remember Drew Peterson? So, hang on. Didn't help Kim Potter. No, so hang on a second, Tamara. So, no, it didn't help Kim Potter. So, yeah, Kim Potter was charged. We've talked about that case before, but Kim Potter was charged. She killed Dante Wright during a traffic stop in a case of taser confusion. So, she thought that she pulled out her taser. She didn't. It was her gun. And we know that, we don't have to get into the facts, but we know that it was a mistake because of her reaction afterwards. And even the attorney for Dante Wright's family admitted, yes, she made a mistake. Even the prosecuting attorney who prosecuted her and tried to get her 10 years in prison, or I think they were asking for 7 years in prison, even they admitted this is a mistake. So, there's no question this was a mistake, but if you look at the Kim Potter case, she made a mistake. She was negligent. The mistake was negligent. And because of her negligent mistake, which is, a short form of what the law is, because she made a negligent mistake and someone died as a result, that is, essentially involuntary manslaughter. So she got 2.5 years in prison. She had already done so. I think she has to do about 2 more years. One more. Let's see. Quick question. Do you think civilians should own body cams as well? Yeah, of course. Absolutely. It's not that I think they should or not. So I think it should be legal. I love when people record police. I don't think there's anything problem with that as long as they're respectful and keep a reasonable distance. Yeah, absolutely. So, I go out of town so just a personal story real quick. My wife is from a small town in South Dakota. We go back there once a year or so. And it's a small town. We usually go to the gym around midnight. There's nothing out there. It's just cornfields. It's about a 20-minute drive to the gym. Long story short, the cops in that town have nothing to do at night. I get pulled over every single time. This past summer, I was pulled over twice. Even though I'm pro-police, I like police, I trust police officers. But every time I get stopped, I have my cell phone camera running, just in case. And my wife is like, what are you doing? And I'm like, listen, you never know. I don't know if they have body cameras. So that's how I behave, especially especially if I'm on a traffic stop. And I've never had a bad experience. Everyone has always been nice, especially in that small town. So yeah, I just want to put it out there that no, I think that civilians should have body cameras. Absolutely, dash cams are a good thing too. Okay, so I want to talk about Drew Peterson. So I'm originally from the Chicagoland area. So Drew Peterson is a case that I followed for the last 15, 20 years or so. And if you remember, this was the case in Bolingbrook, Illinois. Drew Peterson was a sergeant, and he was in his 50s. His wife was 30 years younger than him. Her name was Stacy Peterson, and she went missing. Once she went missing, she was like in her 20s, and he was in his 50s. It was his fourth wife, and what happened with the Drew Peterson case is after she went missing, her body has still never been found. It was Tamar Marie. Yeah, he is a bad dude. He's a bad hombre. Yeah, he then his third wife ended up, Kathleen Savio, years before, had died in kind of a mysterious way. And there were allegations. And Bolingbrook is a town about 15 minutes from the southwest side of Chicago. So Drew Peterson, yeah, he is a character. So his third wife died under suspicious circumstances years before. So once the fourth wife went missing, they went back, exhumed the body of the third wife, did an investigation, and he was actually convicted of murder in the third wife's case. So what makes this kind of interesting is stuff in this case is still going on. They've still never found Stacy Peterson. There's all kinds of allegations that throughout the years, the 30 years that Drew Peterson was with the Bolingbrook Police Department, that he would have all these domestic violence calls, but he would never get taken to jail, even though there was evidence. Multiple wives and girlfriends have called on him, and there was cover-up from the Bolingbrook Police Department, and all of this this hit Chicago. I think it was a national story, but this hit Chicago like crazy. And like I said, I'm from that area. I'm from about 15 minutes from Bolingbrook, Illinois. So I was very familiar with this. I followed this case. So a couple things about this. So the recent news about this is he was convicted back in 2012 of killing the third wife, Kathleen Savio. So while he was in jail for that, he tried to hire a hitman to kill the prosecutor, whose name is James Glasgow. The Will County prosecutor he tried to have killed by a murder-for-hire charge. Obviously, the person who he contracted for the murder-for-hire was an informant. He went to trial on that, and Drew Peterson was convicted of the murder-for-hire, trying to kill the prosecutor that put him in jail. So he's got 38 years for Kathleen Savio's murder and 40 years for trying to kill the prosecutor. So I don't think he'll ever get out. The recent news on that is he is still fighting to get his police pension, which is crazy. So the second murder conviction, or the murder for hire conviction, was in 2016, but he's still trying to get his police pension. So the reason I'm talking about this because in the last week, the appellate court in Illinois came down and basically said that they denied his police pension. The reason they gave for denying the police pension isn't because he was charged with a crime or because he's in jail or even because he was convicted of homicide. The language in the Illinois police pension that they were able to use to deny him his pension benefits is because he used his specific police training and possibly even did some of this on duty. And it was the nexus, the connection between his police training and the crimes that he committed that put him in jail. So he was denied his police pension, but it is absolutely crazy that this case is still going on. One other and none of this is funny, but this is a little funny thing about Chicago's a weird place. So there was a radio station called 97.9 The Loop that played classic rock, and they had this kind of a crazy DJ. Anyways, when this happened, when Stacy first disappeared, Drew Peterson, he couldn't get out of the spotlight. He was doing media interviews. He absolutely loved it. Well, this is before he was convicted, when Stacy was just missing. So the Loop 97.9 radio station in Chicago had on Drew Peterson on the radio show, and they did this funny thing where they had a contest to win a date with Drew Peterson. So many people complained, and they actually had to call it off. But I always thought it was funny that the radio station was trying to do a win a date with Drew Peterson while police were still searching for his fourth wife. So so those are I always thought that the Drew Peterson stuff is always pretty interesting. Let's see if we've got any comments about that. Okay, Netify. If you mix up a non-lethal with a gun, you should So that makes sense. Yeah, a non-lethal. Yeah, so I mean that's what Kim Potter did. It was basically weapon confusion, and that happened. So if you look at the research on the weapon confusion, I think they've started to study this, at least from what I've seen, around 2000, and approximately once a year. So in the last 22 years, it's happened about 20 times, and there's a lot of different reasons for that. But the biggest explanation and the best explanation that I can think of for the weapon confusion is that in the police academy, and then after the police academy, during training and during qualifications, police officers fire their handguns and they reach for and they draw their handguns literally thousands of times. How many times do police officers pull their taser? A couple times in the academy. Maybe more in the academy, but maybe once a year they fire 2 or 3 rounds or 10 rounds from a taser. So it's just one of those things that when police officers, and it doesn't happen often, there's 250 million annual police contacts. This happens, essentially 1 out of every 250 million police contacts. So it isn't something that happens all the time, but it is a weapon confusion that happens. And the best way that I can explain it, and I know this isn't a great analogy, but how you have to think about it. So a lot of times people have 2 cars, and the shifter to drive the car, sometimes it's in the center console, sometimes it's up on the steering wheel. Well, you can imagine a situation, we've all done it, where you get into one car and you reach down for the shifter because that's where you think it is, because that's where it's on in your other car, and really it's up there. So does that mean that you're a bad person? Are you a racist? Are you a horrible driver and should never be able to drive again because you reach for the wrong thing? Now, obviously, it's more severe when it's a police. So I'm not saying that when it's a police and there's weapon confusion, someone dies. But I'm saying that what happens inside your brain and the weird things that the human body does and how memory affects things. It's that same train of thinking, that same line of research that is the confusion to where your hand automatically goes to somewhere else, even though that's not what you intended to do. So that's the best way that I can think about that. Let's see. Same for Scott Peterson. Yeah, we might talk about Scott Peterson next week because he might get a new trial, which is really, really interesting. So I also want to talk about Alec Baldwin. So everybody knows about Alec Baldwin, and we've been trying to keep that up to date here. So that happened in New Mexico, in the middle of nowhere, pretty much, where Alec Baldwin was filming Rust, and he was holding a gun that went off, and he killed Helena Hutchins during the filming, or the pre-production of his Rust Western movie. So, just the one main thing about this is, in an interview that he did, he said that he didn't pull the trigger. And, I think it was George Stephanopoulos he did the interview with, said that, and we will post, I think we have and just so you know, Cop Watch TV was one of the first ones to have some of the Alec Baldwin footage when it comes to the interviews with police and on scene. I think Cop Watch TV, I'm positive Cop Watch TV was the first one in the country to have that. So if you haven't watched the Alec Baldwin footage, especially his interview with police detectives right after this happened, check it out. It is a great watch. Anyways, but in an interview with George Stephanopoulos, he said that he didn't pull the trigger. It was one of those things. It was almost confident to the point where it was a little irritating because when George Stephanopoulos asked the question about pulling the trigger, he was like, "Oh no, of course I didn't pull the trigger. Everybody knows that." Something just came out where the FBI said not so much, and essentially they shot a hole in his magic gun theory because the FBI said, and I quote, that the firearm could not have been made to fire without pulling the trigger. So the FBI took the firearm, they did whatever diagnostic test they did on that specific firearm, and essentially said it could not have been fired unless someone pulled the trigger. So I think that's an important fact to know. Now, again, I'm not saying Alec Baldwin should be charged with a crime. Police are still doing an investigation. I don't know. Civilly, I think it's obvious that he's responsible. But I'm not saying he should be charged with a crime. I'm not saying that he's definitely innocent either. I just think it's important to know that he says he didn't pull the trigger, and the FBI is basically saying that the FBI is basically saying that that isn't the case. The only way it could have been done. Now, I know we talked earlier about memory, a couple different cases, and weird things the human body does. So in defense of Alec Baldwin, which I almost never do, in defense of Alec Baldwin, when you're in a situation like this and you take someone's life, it is probably the most stressful situation that anyone could have in their entire life. If we go back to the first case we talked about, the caller, he's on the phone watching someone maybe break in. That person person was so stressed out that they mistook someone jumping over a fence. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, if that's how human memory works, imagine what Alec Baldwin's memory is of this exact incident. So just because it's his memory that he didn't pull the trigger, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's lying. I mean, when you're in a situation like that, you get tunnel vision, things are a blur, time slows down. So I wouldn't put a whole lot of, I believe that he probably believes that, but it's good to know from the FBI that the trigger was pulled, which is reasonable. Which anyone who knows anything about firearms knows that guns don't magically go off. So the idea of a magic gun doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Let's see. Okay. I'm not. Okay, so Sergeant George, he's asking if Sean Sticks to make a guest appearance on the live stream. If Sean Sticks wants to, if he wants to come on, I think we would have him. He does a great show over on, I think it's called On Patrol Live now. So yeah, if he ever wanted to come on, we would welcome him 100%. Yeah, Only Cops, human memory is so bad. Yeah, Only Cops does a great body cam review every week, so they know almost more than anyone that human memory is, it's just crap. It's shit. It's absolute eyewitness testimony is absolute garbage. So one other thing that I wanted to talk about here, and it's one of those things where it's just not correct information. So I just wanted to get it out there. And for some reason, this criticism is, a lot of it is coming from the right, from the Republican side, which a lot of times we don't see, but it's in reference to the IRS and the hiring of 87,000 more IRS agents. Now listen, I don't want there to be 87,000 more IRS agents. It's my opinion that, and I'm not an expert on federal staffing levels, but if the federal government is going to hire 87,000 more law enforcement officers, maybe they should be put on the Border Patrol. Maybe they should be put in the Secret Service. Maybe they should put in the FBI. Or maybe isn't 87,000 just about the number of people that we would need to put one armed police officer in every single school? So again, if they're going to do that, putting 87,000 people in the IRS doesn't make a whole lot of sense. A lot of people are against that. However, right now the IRS has 21,000 law enforcement agents, and that the 87,000 people that they're looking to hire is over time. And I think right now they're only looking to hire 300 to 350 more actual armed law enforcement. But that's really not what my concern is. So in the posting for the job for the IRS agent, there's a thing in there that said that the individual or the applicants for this job, one of the things that you have to do is you have to carry a gun and be willing to use deadly force if necessary. And people just lost their minds over this. Usually, it's people on the left who overreact and lose their minds, kind of in a dishonest way. But this time, it was coming from the right. I heard it on Clay and Buck. I heard it on all kinds of people criticizing this. And like I said, I don't know if it's honest criticism and they just don't know, or they do know and they're not being honest about it. But either way, I just want to put it out there that the IRS, they have a law enforcement division. So the IRS agents are actual law enforcement officers. They're federal law enforcement officers. So they go through whatever federal academy. They are sworn federal officers. So the idea that the language of armed, having to carry a gun, and will use deadly force if necessary, that is standard boilerplate language for all federal law enforcement jobs. So, the idea that anybody lost their mind or that was on the news, that was a little silly, because that is standard language for for federal jobs. In the law enforcement area, FBI, DEA, marshals, Border Patrol, all of them are going to have that, including IRS agents, which are actual federal law enforcement officers. That armed requirement is not for civilians or accountants. That's only for the actual agents. That was a pretty big news story, and I just kind of wanted to debunk it a little bit because it seems a little bit silly. So those were the cases that I had that I wanted to go over. I'll see if there's any more questions or comments in here. Tracy L says, well, they can put one military person in each school. We have more people in the service than law enforcement, right? Yeah, I don't know about that. The numbers, I'm going to guess yes. So all the numbers that I've seen is there are somewhere between 700,000 and 800,000 police officers in the United States. Now, that counts local, city, county, state police, also all the officers in the federal agencies, including those 21,000 that are already in the IRS. So, if the total number is 800,000, probably half of that is local law enforcement. So my guess is our military has in the millions. So yes, you would think there's more people in the military than there are actual police officers. I don't know if what the answer is, but if if they're going to be hiring 87,000 law enforcement agencies on the federal level, which they're not, but if they were, I think most people would agree that the proper use for those 87,000 people wouldn't be in the IRS. Maybe Border Patrol or putting them in schools or something to that effect would probably make the most sense. We have a lot of people talking about taxes, which is great. So in law school, when I was in law school, I did take tax law, and the way that the system is worked, you can essentially drop one class in all your years of law school. You can drop one class and still graduate on time. So tax law was the class that I dropped. So anything about taxes, I'm not an expert on. I'm not going to know a whole lot about it because that was the one class I dropped because it was so horrible and boring. Let's see. So just a little bit of a teaser for next week. So this is a little bit out of my area, but it's so interesting that I've been paying attention to it a lot. So kind of a teaser for next week. What I'd really like to talk about is Mar-a-Lago and Trump and, just the legal issues around the FBI raid and what happened. And I just want to leave it with a question. So, the FBI raided Trump's Mar-a-Lago for these documents that, apparently have something to do with national security. And I'm just going to leave it with a question because this is the question that I'm going to try to get answered. This is what I want to know. If these actually were national security secrets, national security threats, and the entire country is at threat because Trump had these, why did they wait 18 months? So I guess my thought is, if it's an actual national security threat, go in on day one. Get him back, ask for forgiveness later. Why wait 18 months going back and forth with his attorneys and then eventually doing a raid if it's something that is like top priority, national secrets were all in danger. So it's the 18-month gap that it doesn't make sense that there was an 18-month gap and these are national secrets that have to be back into the custody of the National Archives immediately. That doesn't make sense. That's an issue I'd like to talk about. So I think we'll get into that next week. So let's see if we have any other comments. Otherwise, those were the main cases that I wanted to talk about. But like I said before, if there are any other interesting cases or body cam footage, if you have any suggestions, definitely put them in the comments, put them in the chat, even if you watch it later on. Also, I know a couple of the cases we talked about, we posted the body cam footage. Make sure you put your thoughts about it in the chat. If you think that I got something wrong, put it in there. We definitely go through those, and I'm always interested to see what people have to say, because the idea of debating and discussing these issues, I think, is important. It's okay to disagree as long as we're willing to have a conversation with people who disagree with us. I think that is the most important thing. So I just wanted to remind everyone to definitely like and follow and subscribe to Cop Watch TV, just so for sure you can watch all the great videos that we do and make sure that you can be a part of the lives. If you want to follow me on TikTok or YouTube, it's at Police Law News. Again, my name is Daniel, and I hope that everyone has a great weekend. Thank you.